So the recording should be started now.
Great. So as I was saying, take this as a 40-minute superficial crash course, more like an overview, and mainly as a motivational overview to show you what is happening in healthcare. And the title of this presentation is The Power of AI in Healthcare. I will keep this a little bit informal. And apologies for looking away now, but this is on the other screen. So at NVIDIA, healthcare is really important. It's a very large industry with a 36% continuous annual growth rate by 2025. And in healthcare, there are very different domains that are very important. And here are 5 sort of pillars in healthcare that are really important for NVIDIA. Of course, this is not exhaustive, but those are 5 pillars that we particularly look at. This is genomics analysis, accelerated genomics analysis. And for each of these pillars or domains, we have sort of one software toolkit or software and or hardware platform that we design specifically for this domain. In genomics, it's Parabricks for drug discovery, which is an important field in pharma and healthcare, is BioNeMo. In biomedical imaging, we are co-founder and co-developer of an open source community framework called Monai. For medical devices, we have Holoscan, and there's also a dedicated hardware platform for this. And then there is natural language. For this, we have the platform called NeMo. And I'm going to go into all of them and keep it, as I said, superficial though, mainly as a motivating factor and a view on all the things that are possible now and where the journey is heading. And usually the order is a little bit different. When our product team presents it, I reordered it because this is also how I made sense of it, because the activities are so vast and so broad that the way that I could make sense of it is that I order this by the scale of what we are dealing with. For genomics, we are dealing with chromosomes and genes, RNA as well. A little bit smaller actually than chromosomes. There are molecules, small molecules. This is the domain of pharma, but they are designed based on information that comes out of chromosomes. So often, at least, especially when it goes in the direction of protein design. And so this is the next scale. Then we go a little bit higher in the scale of cells, then on the scale of organs, then on the scale of surgical devices, surgical operating rooms, hospital scale, and then finally really on hospital scale and across hospital scale, and actually on the scale of healthcare systems, these natural language models that are currently taking the world by storm, these are coming in really, really relevant. And NVIDIA is dealing with all of these domains, but really I also don't want this to be a NVIDIA product talk today. I mainly want to give you an overview. Was there a question in the room?
I thought we were just plugging in the power cord.
Ah, yeah, I see. Oh, that's good. Thank you. Don't cut me off, please. So, let's get started with the smallest, or one of the smallest scales in our human body, the chromosomes. Smaller, of course, are proteins and molecules even. I will get to those next. Accelerating genomics is really, or accelerated genomics is really benefiting from AI a lot. Why is this even important? The thing is that our capability to sequence DNA has exponentially improved over the last 2 decades. In 2001, analyzing a single human genome cost $100 million. This has decreased to less than $100 today. And at the same time, the duration has reduced from years in the beginning down to hours now. And this simply means that our capability of generating these sequences is far outgrowing our capability to analyze what is being sequenced. You see the amount of data here in the exabytes region of data for genome from genomic and exomic data is also exponentially growing. And this is one of the domains where NVIDIA is really interested in. This is what NVIDIA works for, basically areas where the compute requirements are so large that you cannot simply address it with any other technology anymore. And it just so happens that the high performance computing route that NVIDIA has been taking over the last, or over the first 20 years of its existence, really came in well for the last 10 years, which is the age of AI or deep learning that has swept the world by storm since 2012. And AI is a high performance computing area, and it helps with the exponential demands for compute in genomics and other areas. And we're going to get to that. So how is AI and NVIDIA in that sense also helping across this computational genomics workflow? If you're not familiar with that workflow, I wasn't, and I'm certainly no expert in it, but I can roughly explain it. It's separated into three areas, into three let's say, steps. There's the primary analysis, secondary, and tertiary analysis. In the primary analysis, we need to sequence we need to read out the sequence of nucleotides from the genomic material. DNA base calling is what this is called. This is basically happens in genome sequencers. You get the fluorescent stained genomic material, and this is read out in scanners with, for example, literally with light sensors is one of the techniques to read this out. And you can think of it as image processing on a single line. It's not 2D imaging, not 3D imaging, it's 1D imaging. And a lot of convolutional neural networks are used to read out these sequences and process them into understandable nucleotide sequences. Of course, this is very error prone, and all these errors need to be corrected and polished. This is also done a lot with AI models. This is the primary step. For this, we have our CUDA. This is sort of our programming language for GPUs. Hardly anybody works with this. There are layers and layers of abstraction that make it easier for programmers to work with this on a Python level, for example. Most importantly, these models, they read out gigabytes per second of data, and they need to process that. And for this, we have an accelerated inference technique. So you use pre-trained models, but you need to apply them to these sequences very, very fast. And for this, we have a library called TensorRT, which accelerates this inference step, the prediction step. Then there is the secondary analysis, for which we have Parabricks. This library reimplements the state-of-the-art tool in academia called GATK. It's a CPU-based library. It's fantastic, does a lot of things, but it's slow compared to what you can do with GPUs. You easily can get speedups of 100, of a factor of 100 and more. Think about it. An analysis that would take, I don't know, on the scale of 100 days is done in 1 day. It's always abstract to hear this. Numbers, 100x speedup, what does it mean? It simply means that something that was previously taking 3 months or more is now done overnight. And the secondary analysis step is to align these sequences that are being read here. Think of it this way. Unfortunately, we cannot read a whole genome in one long go, like in one long spaghetti strand. You have to read it in snippets. It's like cutting up the spaghetti into a lot of little chunks, and now you have to realign them into one long spaghetti. This is alignment and assembly, a computationally very heavy and complex task, which Parabricks and GATK, implements and Parabricks speeds up basically. And then you have to analyze the genome for variants, like are there genetic markers that are indicative of a certain disease? Variant calling is also very heavily accelerated with deep learning models like Google's Deep Variant, which is part of this Parabricks library. Finally, once you've analyzed a whole population of patients, you want to interpret the data. You want to model genome-wide association studies, GWAS, for example. These are tasks that are in the tertiary step. For this, we have an accelerated library called the Rapids. If you're already familiar with data science, machine learning, think of this as an GPU accelerated version of Pandas, data frames, of scikit-learn, machine learning library, of NumPy, and so on. And data scientists who are very familiar with Python, the Python ecosystem, feel right at home. It's in fact the very same API. And they don't have to change their code. They simply get 40x and more speed up on these large genomic population studies. And this simply makes analyses possible that were previously only theoretical. There are real-world impacts of this work that my colleagues here at NVIDIA are doing. I'm always excited to hear this, and I give them full credit. We work with the largest sequencing companies. We work with universities, and just 3 of the things here from the slide that I want to highlight. Stanford University was the first team to set this world record for fastest DNA sequencing in under 5 hours. This is really great for critical care patients, especially in pediatric care. They can basically take a genomic sample from a tumor and sequence that within 5 hours. This is almost bedside treatment, something that would have previously taken a week. And this makes really a difference in how you can treat patients. NanoString can analyze cells 5 to 20 times faster with their sequencers. Ultima Genomics, they were the first one to break this sound barrier of delivering a genome analysis for $100 and less. And with this, genomic analysis just becomes faster. Now, why do we even want to analyze the genome? Well, it's because the genome encodes how proteins are formed in our body, and also how certain molecules interact with our body. So in essence, the genome is the foundation for programmable biology in our body. And programmable biology is also the domain of drug discovery. Here, generative AI is really important. We all know about ChatGPT, we know about the large GPT models that are out there, Google's Bard, and Meta's Llama models, and so on. And we all interact with it, probably you by now as well. I interact with it almost on a daily basis for coding and for other questioning tasks and so on. But just like we have our natural language, genomic sequences are sort of a genomic language. And protein sequences, the sequence of amino acids, is also a language. So these large language models and all the knowledge that was learned from there has also been translating into biotechnology and into programmable biology. And you see here an exponential increase in numbers of papers. Some papers you might have heard of, AlphaFold, AlphaFold 2, they have really become famous and also reached sort of the wider public. There are other models that are lesser known, like Equifold, DiffDoc, ESM2, ESM3 by now, actually. And those are lesser known, but they are nonetheless impressive. What can be done with this? A lot of downstream tasks. Here are a couple of them. Predicting virus evolution, predicting gene expression, complex 3D structures of molecules, proteins. You can generate molecules. You can also generate functional proteins completely in silico in the computer within microseconds. And you can even generate them in a controlled fashion where you want to have a particular functionality, a functional primitive on that protein, and generate the rest, sort of. We will see an example later as an animation. And why is this important? In early drug discovery, the typical process is to identify the target, like what protein, for example, do we want a drug to target? This needs to be identified. Then you develop leads a lot of little drug candidates, molecules, small molecules. And then you need to optimize over this and iterate over this. And for example, identifying the target. What is the protein that we want to reach? Well, there is, for example, X-ray crystallography. For this, you first have to crystallize a protein. Then you have to analyze it with crystallography. Then you have to try to understand the 3D structure. Very few domain experts can even do this. And then you have to develop leads in the wet lab, in assay, bioassays, and so on. All of this traditionally took a company like In Silico Medicine, with whom we've worked, and we've worked with them using or they've used our Parabricks library. In the traditional process for them took 4.5 years and cost $500 million. And by using generative AI, they were able to reduce this to 1.5 years, but more importantly, the cost shrunk from 500 million to 2 million. That's more than 200 times cheaper process and 3 times faster, 250 times actually. And think of what this implies. It basically means that the drugs that are going to come out in future, they are going to come out much faster and much more specific to the diseases that need to be targeted. We have finally a shot also at targeting rare diseases, because those have not the commercial reward to develop at scale. But now it's starting to become possible because the costs have reduced so much. And for this, we have this BioNeMo platform where actually In Silico worked with, and it has a couple of baseline functionalities. One is protein generation. I like to think of it as input output. Yeah. So it takes as input an amino acid sequence, and it can generate sequences that are similar or maximally dissimilar to these sequences. For this, there are models like ProtGPT-2. It's a GPT model, as the name implies. Then other task is protein learned sequence and structure, basically embedding. So if you take an amino acid sequence, you want to take a neural network model and project this down to a vector representation. And these vector representations can then be numerically analyzed, like projected down into lower dimensional space or clustered and so on. You see here a cluster of various proteins from various protein families. You can also predict the structure. AlphaFold is one of the models that does that. You take an amino acid sequence in these letters and you predict the 3D protein structure. Again, something that was previously only very painstakingly possible via crystallography. Now it's possible in the blink of an eye. You will see this later. Molecular generation is to take in a molecule's Miles string representation. You know these representations. There's a little string representation for that. Then you can take models and generate a lot of molecules that are, for example, similar. And then molecular docking. If you have a 3D protein and a small molecule structure, you want to predict how good does this molecule dock to this protein in order to render it useless, for example, a typical task in drug design. For this, there are models like DiffDock. And in BioNeMo and in our BioNeMo service platform, all of these models are integrated into a very nice package, and it's accessible via an API so that others can use that. So this is very abstract. Just a second, I want to deactivate this and lead into this slide a little bit. So I mentioned this, these functionalities here. This is a little bit abstract. Let's bring this down to a level where we have an experience with it. And this is the COVID pandemic. In the COVID pandemic, we all experienced that it came out with a wild type and it affected many people. But over time, we got more and more variants, right? And here's an example for the Omicron variant, and one molecule that affects its proliferation or its replication. This is called main protease, or MPro. It's a key protein for the replication of viruses. And in the Omicron variant, this was slightly different from the wild type. And the wild type variant was known in 3D structure, but it was not known for the Omicron variant. And here you can see the amino acid sequence for this protein. How this looks in 3D was completely unknown. And think of it, in Omicron variant, the difference to the wild type is only a single letter. I think it was around the middle position. One of these letters got flipped. And this leads to a very different 3D structure though, and which would be another huge effort to crystallize. With AI, you can predict this structure. This was real time, like it is really in the blink of an eye to generate the 3D structure. I cannot interpret this very well. Domain experts can. And for them, this is a huge cue how to continue with the drug design process. Now, how would the drug design process continue? This is another, by the way, what you're seeing here is this BioNeMo service, and the UI version. Typically, engineers would use the API version where you can access this through the web with a few commands, completely on code basis and on HTTP basis. But here we see it actually in action in our user interface. It's sort of nice for rapid prototyping of a pipeline before you actually code it out. And now let's get from the 3D structure of the molecule of this main protease of the Omicron variant to designing a drug for it. And it's important to note that there was a drug called ensitrelvir. It was an antiviral for the COVID-19 wild type. How well it worked, I'm not sure, but it was one of the drugs that was being applied on the wild type. It was known though that it is not as effective for the Omicron variant. So let's sort of design candidates for that. What you can do is you can take a prediction model, enter the SMILE string. It's here, this like CN1C, this alphanumeric code for the chemical structure. And now we generate 20 molecules. And again, this is in real time. Now we have 20 new drug candidates ranked by similarity to ensitrelvir. And this is Tanimoto distance or similarity. So you can rank them by similarity and, for example, start your drug design process with the most similar candidate. Now, continuing this route in the wet lab would be, and with bioassays and so on, and really large scale analysis in the lab would be very tedious. We can now go this step further and again use AI models like DiffDoc to take the 3D molecule, the 3D protein that we generated, the main protease of the Omicron variant, and try to see whether the new drug candidate that we designed just now in the slide before, in the video before, how well it docks, where it docks, and how well it docks to the main protease prediction that we generated. And you can see here that these are 20 candidate poses, how this molecule might dock to the protein. And the docking would affect how efficiently this main protease is blocked. You can even cycle through them by probability. But one thing that you can immediately see is that all 20 pose candidates are within one pocket of this protein. And again, I'm not an expert in this domain, but I know that the experts are delighted when they see something like this because it really helps them in the drug design process. And this is one way how, just like a illustrative example in a domain that we also are familiar with, Omicron, the COVID pandemic, and think of the urgency of that pandemic and how much drug design could be accelerated in such an urgent situation with tools like this. Think of it, this was just one of the drug candidates, and you saw how fast it was. Essentially, this means that you can generate and test the validity or the candidacy of millions of small molecules in no time. And you can design these molecules even with other properties in mind. Like you can use other AI models to predict their toxicity, their water solubility, their uptake through the blood-brain barrier, and so on. These are all properties that can be predicted with other AI models. In essence, what I'm trying to say here is that the biotechnology realm is experiencing nothing less than a revolution right now. And this is echoed by all the experts that I talk with, that I listen to in talks through my work at NVIDIA. You can even go further and generate entire proteins by according to your conditionals. Let's say you have a condition of a known motif, a functional motif, and you want to generate a particular protein in 3D to build around that, like a lattice, a protein lattice that carries this functional motif. You can do this with diffusion models. You've used Stable Diffusion maybe, or a more end-user tool like Midjourney on your phones. You can do the same in with protein design. You can put the functional motif in here and let a GPT model fill out the blanks, just like we do with chat models as well. Fill in the blanks to generate me a 3D molecule that can fulfill the function that I want. And again, to sum it up, all this is accelerating the drug design process. Now, drug design often affects something like tumor growth. And for this, we go one scale higher now, from the scale of molecules and chromosomes to the scale of cells. Let's say we want to, for example, analyze how certain drugs affect tumor growth in large assays of cell growth banks, or how tumor cells are expressed in the body tissue of, let's say, a biopsy that was taken. This is the field of pathology, and a revolution has been taking place here as well over the last 20 years, which led to the field of digital pathology. It's basically the technology of whole slide images. You can take biopsies and fixate them in, I think it's in paraffin, and then you can cut slices through them, microtome slices, and scan those 20 slices maybe per biopsy, which is a great technique. And digital pathologists can look at these slices, find tumorous regions, and classify them. And this can affect the treatment of the patient, of course, maybe initiating surgery and or radiation therapy. Now, as I said, one slice is not enough. Typically, a biopsy generates 20 or more of these slices. The problem is that each of these slices is multi-gigapixel. This is a pixel size of 200,000 by 200,000. So it's not like our 12 megapixel images from our phone. This is gigapixel sized. So you can zoom in here endlessly. If you see this, you can zoom in down to this level. And this is computationally very demanding to even visualize this, let alone to analyze it with AI. But the task, of course, would be for an AI to take away this tedious task of looking through all the slices, scrolling through them, zooming in at the appropriate position to identify whether there is a tumor or not. Pathologists are unreasonably effective in doing this. I don't get it, how they can go through such a stack of so much information in such little time. But they literally have to go through slice stacks from 2, 3, 4 dozen patients per day. And this may be fine in the morning, but in the afternoon, or if they have to do this late at night, errors start slipping in, and things can be overlooked, which can have, of course, drastic impact on the patient and their treatment. Now, AI is super effective here and has a great promise, because you can just put AI models to go through this in parallel, patch-wise, aggregate it, find cells, find the cell nuclei, and so on. You can let also pathologists interactively annotate the data, click on cells, surround them, measure certain morphometric like shape characteristics of the cells and of the tissue regions. You can let them create bounding boxes and focus on an area and really count the cells in this area. How many cell count is one typical measure for cell growth, and which is an indicator for tumor. But there are so much more models by now that can actually segment certain cell area, tissue areas like arteries, arterioles, glomeruli in these whole slide images. Of course, a very obvious way to use AI here is to analyze whole slide images, create a heat map for the probability of whether there is a tumor or not. And let me switch on this laser pointer again. Whether there is a tumor or not. There are more advanced AI models that can ingest whole slides at a time and basically boil down the information into a single vector that can tell whether there is a tumor in the whole slice or not, and then back propagate this into the slide to give a heat map similar to here. But basically, this is a tool for whole slide classification. Take the whole slide and just tell me, is there a tumor or not? This alone is a huge help for digital pathologists. And something, if you're in this domain, a field where I like to work in and where I have a great interest and have published myself is graph neural networks. And you can detect this nuclei and basically connect them in a graph and express the whole image as a graph of cells. And this is also very interesting field from a AI theoretical point of view, where AI is really coming in and looking at this whole field from a very different perspective. Let's go one cell higher or one scale higher to the scale of organs. And digital pathology is already medical imaging, but there is medical imaging at a larger scale, of course. It really is the essential instrument in healthcare. There are 2 million devices out there from 16,000 companies that offer 10,000 plus modalities, and they're used in the entire periclinical workflow. You can use it for screening, X-ray, ultrasound, mammography. You can use it for diagnosis, like if you use MRI, CT, PET imaging. You can use it for treatment. In surgery, for example, with 2D plus time, 3D plus time, even 4D plus time. And quickly we get into higher dimensional domains from 2D imaging, which we know from web images that we all look at and generate, to higher dimensional problems like 3D and 4D, 5D even. This is a particular domain-specific challenge. Hardly any other domain has this challenge of high dimensional imaging. There are other challenges in healthcare informatics, like how to get images out of these complex and often archaic imaging systems in the clinic. Then apply your modern AI model, that's fine. Anybody can do this, let's say, but it's really difficult to get these results back into the clinical workflow, into the clinical systems like PAC systems, HL7 engines, FHIR databases. And then even more complex, how to bring this into the workflow of a radiologist or of a surgeon and the way that they like to digest and process these images. And this is such a great challenge. And many teams were working on this for many years, different academic units, different industries. And in 2019, NVIDIA and King's College London, they had developed their own frameworks. NVIDIA had its own closed source proprietary one, which was successful in industry, but hardly used in academia. Academia had frameworks that were hardly being used in industry. And so the idea was to join forces, create one framework that brings the community together. This was pitched to the largest society for image analysis and computer vision and image analysis that we have, MICAI Society. And an advisory board was formed, which is mostly academic, and a framework was called, it's called MONAI, the Medical Open Network for AI. This is the framework that I work with on a daily basis, definitely. Like, I work with this every day. It has different aspects to it for model development, for application deployment, and you can do AI-assisted annotation with it. You can train a model while you're annotating data, and it gets better and better at understanding what you're trying to do, and it accelerates your annotation task. You can train all kinds of models with MONAI Core. There are pre-trained models in our MONAI Model Zoo, and then through a concept called MONAI Application Packages, you can bring these models fairly easily into cloud services, hospitals, medical devices. But the best thing about it is really that it's a community framework, and it's bringing the community together from academia and industry. And this framework was founded in 2019, but it has reached widespread adoption and popularity, and it also has reached a maturity level in terms of code quality and model performance. This is an example just from a few weeks ago at MICAI, at the MICAI conference. There are often many challenges. Our research team at NVIDIA participated in 5 challenges and won 4 out of them. One of them was the very prestigious and long-standing brain tumor segmentation challenge, the BRATS challenge. And it was won with a single tool, which can be configured with a one-liner. It's basically a tool that does all kinds of data scientists analysis tasks in a single go and reduces the development time from really many weeks to participate in such a challenge to 3 days or actually less. Like you can set up participating in a challenge in an afternoon. Is basically download the data, put the tool, point it to your data, maybe take a few design choices, but that's it. The rest is compute. You outsource the complex part to the compute aspect, to your hardware, and let computers do the job that previously was kind of painstaking to do for data scientists. And it's really diverse, can do kidney, abdominal CT, can do MRI in brain, can do ultrasound on the mitral valves of the heart, head and neck tumors in PET, and multi-organ segmentation in CT, vessel segmentation, all of that with one tool that basically does the job for you. But segmentation is only one use case. There are others. Generative AI is not only relevant in text generation, but also in imaging. Here's an example how I generate images of an elderly person. These generative AI models, these diffusion models, are conditioned on patient parameters, so I can prompt the model to generate an MRI of an elderly 80-year-old woman, and you automatically start seeing this brain cortical atrophies that are typical for the brain age, for the brain at this age. But you can also simulate the appearance of rare diseases. This is a hydrocephalus of an otherwise healthy adult, a super rare condition, only happens 11 out of 100,000 cases. And just by prompting the ventricular volume to be very large and the of a 40-year-old male, for example, but otherwise the brain should appear healthy, and then you can generate thousands of such images and start filling up the population of your data set in areas where you have rare diseases and rare cases. Registration is optimal alignment, can be done with AI. Self-supervised learning, basically pre-training model backbones on large packs, archives with hundreds of thousands scans in the clinical databases. Reconstruction, fast MRI reconstruction from undersampled case base. This is all doable with MRI, and it's all doable within 1eye, and there are very nice tutorials for that. Training your models is fine, but let's get, and you can operate AI on the organ level. Let's go one scale out into the actual application in the hospital and in the operating room. Here we get to medical instruments, and I assume you're all fine with that. I put a trigger warning for other audiences. I assume you're fine. But there are videos of surgical scenes. They are minimally invasive. It's not even that bloody. Still, I like to put trigger warnings. So maybe close your eyes if you're not okay with that. Pretend this is an ASMR podcast then. But here is a platform that NVIDIA has built, because it's again another domain where domain-specific challenges are present. And the main challenge here is that we need to integrate a lot of sensors in the operating room for ultrasound, for imaging, for laparoscopy, endoscopy, colonoscopy, for tracking sensors, for multispectral imaging, and so on. All of this, laser scanning even, all of this needs to be integrated into one platform with very, very low latency, including, of course, very fast image and video processing. And NVIDIA built a hardware platform for this called Clara IGX, and a software toolkit that is open source that goes on top. All of the software I mentioned previously in this slide deck, by the way, are all open source and free to use. NVIDIA offers enterprise versions that are paid on top, so basically enterprise support. But for you in academia, this is not relevant. The cool takeaway is that you can use all of this for free, basically. And it allows you, this platform, the software, Holoscan, and the hardware, IGX, they allow you to process multiple streams at once, multiple AI models at once, 30+ models at the same time, 50+ video streams at latencies of less than 10 milliseconds, which is really important in a few use cases. Here you see one of them. This is an early use case. A team from IHU Strasbourg, and they combined years of research into 5 concurrent AI models that can analyze laparoscopic video to detect instruments. You see here this at the tip, there is this label called hook for organ segmentation, segmenting the gallbladder here in this case, for example, or the bile duct, segmenting critical view of safety of this Calot triangle, predicting the remaining surgery time, how long is this still going to take, so that outside of their operating room, hospital organization can take this into account and route patients differently. And finally, surgery phase detection, which helps in automatic reporting afterwards. And all of this on one box. The box is here on this little card, and it runs in real time on a 4K laparoscopic video stream. This is actually early work from 2021. We are now 2 years further, and there are other teams who use this to, in real time, actuate robotics. So this is Moon Surgical. They were actually able to, with our platform, to prototype clearance, get prototype clearance from FDA in 15 months. This is completely unheard of, even at 30% reduced cost. And this robot basically looks at the video, looks where the surgical tools are, and then automatically actuates the video, the camera, to have an optimal view on the surgical cetus and on the tools. Because otherwise, as you see in this video, the surgeon needs to take the hand away, reposition the camera. This disrupts the workflow. And surgeons who are using this now on a daily basis at the partner hospital of Moon Surgical, they're really delighted because it makes everything so much easier. Like they can just focus on the surgery, not on where the camera is looking. This is done by a robot now. Here's another very cool example, augmented reality, which has been researched for 2-3 decades in the operating room, but still has been facing problems and barriers to be accepted. Because if you take endoscopic video and you overlay with augmented reality, pre-segmented preoperative imaging, like these organ or vessel trees here, and if you do this, then you overlay your surgical tools. This is really dangerous. You don't see anything anymore. You don't see where your tools are. What are you doing? Are you cutting an artery or something? So this can be dangerous. And it's almost naive, like it's almost obvious what the solution is. You just need to segment these tools and overlay them on top. And this is what is happening here. We also have this as a little animation. So here, observe, this is with the AI tool without. You see how dangerous it is. You don't see anything anymore. But with AI activated on 4K HDR surgical video with near zero latency, you can nicely segment and then mask these tools and put them back on the augmentation, and suddenly it feels very natural and right, whereas this feels very wrong. And this helps in augmented reality becoming more accepted. And we're collaborating with many tool providers, and they've already integrated these platforms, both IGX and Holoscans, in their devices. And we're getting to the end, and I'm also running out of time, so I'm going to keep this one a bit brief. Why? Because it's probably the field where you've experienced AI the most already, and it's the field where we have the most intuitive grasp of how much language models can help. And of course, we now go one scale higher, even from operating room. We go to the scale of hospitals, cross hospitals, healthcare systems, and cross-national cooperations in medical research and medical device companies. And this is large language models. I took two figures on the next two slides from great papers from that Eric Topol has co-authored, a fantastic author and healthcare AI expert. Follow him on social media. Everything that he collaborates on and his team works on is really usually fantastic. Here's a very nice overview of what LLMs can do in healthcare on the side of medical professionals and patients. I'm just going to pick 3 or 4 out of each. For medical professionals, clinical documentation, I mentioned it, surgeons, they need to spend hours after a hard surgical day to document what was happening in the surgery. And likewise, radiologists, digital pathologists, this can be helped with using AI models that ingest and interpret the imaging and then create automatic documentation with large language models. Interpreting radiology, creating discharge summaries, suggesting treatment options, generating notes. This is the domain of LLMs for professionals. For patients, I just recently had the case, I got a blood exam. My doctor didn't have time to talk to me. I talked to the front desk assistant. She explained it, yeah, like hand wavy, like she had no time. The doctor had no time at all. I, to this day, don't know what's exactly happening in my blood screening. They just told me it's fine. Everything's fine. Okay, good, fine. It would still be nice to know details. And this is something that LLMs can help with. They can analyze laboratory results, again, with imaging, take a photo, it scans it, does OCR on that and puts it through an LLM, and the LLM explains what's happening. There are studies that show that interpreting physician notes or having a health chatbot, getting personalized health recommendations are actually preferred by patients from LLMs because LLMs are more empathetic. It sounds ridiculous, but we are at the point where AI models have more empathy or create patient advice that is more empathetic in formulation than what doctors do, simply because doctors are overburdened. They have no time to deal with patients in an appropriate manner. And this is another field where medical professionals are appreciating LLMs as well, because they help with patient communication. Analyzing variables, symptom assessment, disease descriptions, just learning, getting a crash course in your disease. This is a field where LLMs can help. And of course, there are lots of challenges, and I call this the title of the presentation is The Power of AI in Healthcare, simply because it frees me from the responsibility to talk about all the challenges, the caveats and roadblockers. But of course, there are many, and this is a word cloud that came across my mind when I was creating this slide deck. So I just put it into a word cloud, put it here: safety, calibration, audits, fairness, bias, hallucinations, guardrailing, accountability, liability. These are all such big challenges. But I usually like to put the view on the slide around and put it this way. Each of these words is a PhD thesis, can actually be the research topic for an entire research chair or a research grant. Each of these words can be an idea for a startup, could be the next unicorn. Think of it this way: these are all challenges, but these are also all opportunities for us and for you to get into this field, to get this field further, and also, frankly, to create jobs. There is a lot of talk about the dangers of AI and job uncertainty and taking jobs away and so on. I don't think this will happen to healthcare professionals by any time soon, by any means, because it always needs the human touch, especially in medicine. But there are many domains where this is a real question, and it's nothing that I have an answer for. But I do know that all these words on this cloud here will create new jobs and new fields of employment. And here's a final one for the road. It's the domain that I was doing research in when I was group leader in medical AI at the clinic. And it's the domain where the field or the research question that I'm still most interested in. And this is multimodal AI, because a patient never is just the image, is not just the lab report, is not just the cell analysis, the biopsy. Heck, it's not even just the genome, is all of it together. And doctors do look at patients in a holistic way. And This is again a paper that Eric Topol co-authored, and I simply stole the figure from this. I want to give this for you. We're getting into an area where, and big companies have started with that. There's Matt Palm, there is, how is it called? Microsoft just announced it last week at RSNA. I forgot the name. Haim or something. There are big corporations that are collaborating with large healthcare networks who have collected multimodal data with imaging, electronic health records, certain signals like electrocardiograms, multiomics data, genomics, pathomics, and so on. Combining that with medical domain knowledge like literature, publications, clinical notes, knowledge graphs, ingesting text and audio, and then leading to dynamic task answering, like question answering, multimodal inputs and outputs, basically flexible interactions with the AI that are very flexibly solvable by AI for doctors. And this is the roadmap of not just the next 2-3 years, this will be the next decade, next 2 decades of bringing this together, putting this together on the technology side, and then companies rolling this out into usable tools with a great user interaction so that doctors can improve the patient care in healthcare. So many applications, many of them I've mentioned here, chatbots for patients, interactive note-taking, augmented surgery, grounded radiology reports, text-to-protein generation, we have that almost already, bedside decision support, and all of that under one hood. This will be the roadmap for the next 10 plus years, I think, and where this whole story is heading. Now, to get in touch with us, if you're interested in this, I work with Monai, and I can wholesomely recommend it for you if you work in imaging. You can use it everywhere from your laptop to your workstation to the cloud, on Google Colab, wherever. You can interact with us through webpage, to GitHub, to the community channels on Slack. There are boot camps for you, tutorials, if you're familiar with Python, and all of that readily available, open source, freely usable. You can even found a company and use it commercially. It's really nice. And there are AI trainings and the developer program. I will put out this, I will compile a PDF of these slides and pass them on to you so that you can click on these links, especially on the last slide. But just note this, there are developer programs, and you can get free training if you sign up. That's basically creating an account with NVIDIA, that's it. And this is a slide for a startup audience. Not sure whether this is interesting for you, but this will be in the slide deck as well. We have a startup network that connects over 15,000 startups, 2,500 of which are healthcare alone, globally represented. And we like to talk to the developers who are creating the tools that will drive healthcare for the next X years. And this is why it's so important for us to be in touch with startups as well as academia. And this brings me to the end. I hope this was informative, not too superficial, not too much. Hopefully motivating. This was the main purpose of this talk, to give you a whole scope of everything that is happening out there. And I went a little bit over time, sorry to the organizers. I hope we still have time for 1 or 2 questions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sorry for going over time.
No problem. Well, I would like to give you a warm thank you. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah. And well, are there any burning questions? Or is the main question, where's the coffee machine? I see 2 questions. Amin.
Thank you, Ahmad, for your very interesting talk.
My pleasure.
I was just wondering if you know there is any drugs that are already developed with the help of NVIDIA technology.
Yeah, there are. Many of them are in stealth. We are ourselves like eagerly awaiting the first FDA approval of a AI generated drug. And it's a matter of when, not of a matter of if this will happen. It's a little bit, it's almost around the corner. And when this happens, this will be another sound barrier that will be broken. And we know a few. I don't know the specifics. I think I heard a number of, we have like one that is very close. There are 4 that are in the pipeline from different companies and startups with whom we collaborate. Yeah, I don't know the specifics of it, and even if I couldn't talk about it, but it's exciting. I'm watching this field of drug discovery peripherally. Like, I always am curious when my colleagues present the updates on that. I wanted to share it with you. Keep an eye out. When it happens, it will be big and it will come to the news. It will be exciting. And personally, I think it will open the door to so many. You can think of it almost on a patient-specific level. There are rare diseases where, and most of those rare diseases are in pediatric patients, where you need genomics analysis to find the disease, to identify, to pinpoint it, and then you can almost for every patient personally, you can tweak it, modify it a little bit, and if there are appropriate approval processes in place, then we can get to this point of patient-specific drug design. It's still far out in the future, but we at least now it's tangible. It's not science fiction anymore.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
One very short question.
My question is just about how do you support the pharmaceuticals and biopharmas? Is that you provide a service on drug discovery? Some of them already have their data scientists, but it seems that you also you can support them on that if they don't have the capability of performing drug discovery through AI. Is that correct?
Yeah, there are different ways how we interact. I'll try to keep the answer also short. Let me think. First of all, we provide this service, which is a platform that combines many tools and many models from open domain into one. With one API, it just cuts down development time from months to maybe a few days or weeks. That's one way. Then certain teams have very particular models. We collaborate them under NDA. We look at their models, we accelerate it. Let's say they have a drugs or a protein design, protein synthesis model that generates a protein in a second, but they need to get it to a millisecond. Well, we help them to speed this up by a factor of 100x, 1000x by putting them together with our engineers. We develop specific CUDA kernels that gets rolled out to the whole world in the next release, but it was designed because a startup needed a particular kernel in the CUDA framework to speed up their model. Is another way, a very specific, very needle pin way to interact. And there are other ways, but yeah, those are just 2 examples.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I think that's all the questions we have time for, and I'll stop the recording now.
Thank you.
And